at my own graduation celebration. A lavish affair held under the warm, stifling glow of golden restaurant lights, surrounded by extended family and friends. My parents executed their calculated move. They leaned conspiratorially across the polished mahogany table, their voices dropping just enough to project authority without alerting the wider audience, and delivered the ultimatum. I was to immediately sign over every penny of my entire inheritance to my sister, Vanessa, as if my future was merely an asset they controlled. When I quietly but firmly refused, a dark, familiar shadow crossed my father's face. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He simply retrieved my newly framed diploma from his leather briefcase, flicked open a silver lighter with a deliberate click, and held the flame beneath the parchment. "You don't deserve a penny of Grandpa's money," he hissed, the cruelty in his eyes amplified by the flickering light. The room froze, the official university seal shriveled, the heavy paper curling instantly into brittle black ash, while every guest stared in horrified silence. But the anticipated breakdown never came. I didn't shed a single tear. I didn't plead or bargain. Instead, I simply smiled, pushed my chair back, and walked away. The profound stillness I felt that night wasn't born of defeat. It was rooted in a strategy they could never comprehend or burn. And they were utterly clueless about the truth that was scheduled to confront them the following week. My name is Skylar Lawson, and for most of my life, I had perfected the art of strategic invisibility, particularly at the dinner table. It wasn't a lack of spirit or conviction that drove this silence, but the hard-won knowledge that in my family, quiet compliance was the only form of survival. Marcus and Elaine, my parents, loved the idea of a perfect, aspirational household in Delmare, the kind of picture-perfect suburban fantasy they mailed out on glossy holiday cards. Vanessa, my younger sister, was the effortless star of that production. She was the golden child, adorned and celebrated, the subject of every boastful conversation with strangers. I was the secondary character, the other daughter, the practical one, the silent observer they often forgot existed until they needed me, the one they'd fail to introduce unless someone specifically asked. Growing up, I learned exactly where my value lay or where it didn't. At 11, I dragged my cumbersome, prize-winning robotics project across the school gymnasium floor by myself because Dad had chauffeured Vanessa to an exclusive, after-school art gallery event instead. At 15, I boarded an overnight bus alone to attend a rigorous research program, while my parents flew Vanessa first class to a fashion conference in Milan. And at 17, when I unexpectedly won a highly competitive statewide academic scholarship, I scanned the packed auditorium for their faces and found only one familiar figure. Grandpa Lawson, standing quietly in the back corner, just as he always did. Grandpa Lawson was the only person who truly saw me. He understood the architecture of my mind, the way I could occupy space without needing to make noise. He didn't just teach me practical skills, how to swap out a faulty circuit board, how to dissect the fine print of a corporate contract. He taught me how to establish boundaries without raising my voice. "Silence," he often said, his gaze steady, "is a strategy, Skylar, never a surrender." Perhaps that's why I never pushed back. When my mother casually dismissed my academic accomplishments with a faint, disinterested nod, or when my father repeatedly insisted that Vanessa had the brighter, more artistic future, I managed to convince myself that their opinion didn't matter. I told myself I didn't need their applause to succeed. But the truth was infinitely more complex. There were sleepless nights in my college dorm, staring at the sterile ceiling, wondering what it would feel like if, just once, my parents were genuinely proud of me. Not proud of how quiet I was or how little trouble I caused, but proud of the competent, self-sufficient woman I was forging myself into. I foolishly believed graduation night might be that elusive moment. I imagined Marcus shaking my hand with genuine warmth, Elaine pulling me in for a spontaneous, heartfelt photograph, and Vanessa offering a playful, teasing insult, the kind of affection siblings trade when the cameras are off. Instead, we sat at that polished table under the oppressive golden lights, and I felt the familiar, insulating divide settle between us. Every question about my new software engineering job came laced with a subtle, challenging edge, as if they were waiting for me to falter and admit I wasn't worthy. Vanessa, meanwhile, discussed her future in vague, extravagant strokes, new art studios, international travel, boundless future opportunities that somehow always relied entirely on my parents' financial support. Despite the tightening knot in my stomach, I tried desperately to ignore the unease. It was my graduation. I wanted one night of peace, one memory that looked close enough to a genuine family gathering to hold on to. But people reveal their true selves when they believe they possess ownership over you. And that night, my parents revealed everything. The tension wasn't explosive. It gathered slowly, like dark storm clouds accumulating silently behind the facade of polite conversation. I noticed the shift in Marcus's constant fiddling with his expensive watch, the way Elaine's polite smile seemed stapled rigidly onto her face whenever a congratulatory remark was directed at me, and Vanessa's smug posture, leaning back as if she already possessed the entire evening. I forced myself to stay present, answering detailed questions about my new software engineering role with a deliberate, light tone, sipping water to ground myself. Yet, underneath the surface, a chilling anticipation brewed, as if the three of them had carefully rehearsed this entire scene before they even walked into the restaurant. It began the moment the panna cotta desserts arrived. Marcus cleared his throat, a jarring, authoritarian sound designed to command immediate attention. He produced a worn, brown leather folder from his bag and slid it across the marble tabletop toward me. "Skylar," he stated, his voice low and serious, "this needs your immediate attention." Elaine folded her manicured arms, watching me intently. Vanessa, with a deliberate, theatrical motion, tucked a golden curl behind her ear, her smile hinting that she was fully aware of the plot twist I was about to confront. I opened the folder just enough to glimpse the contents. Financial statements, property details, and something sealed and notarized. My pulse jumped instantly. I knew exactly what this was. Marcus didn't ease into the subject. He never does. "Your grandfather trusted you," he dictated. "But you already have a stable, six-figure job. Vanessa is just starting out, she needs capital. Sign the transfer so she can manage the inheritance properly. It's what family does. Asterisk family. Asterisk the word only seemed to materialize when they required my compliance. I kept my voice level, steady, and dangerously calm. "I am not signing anything." The table went instantly silent. Vanessa blinked, clearly stunned that I had dared to articulate the refusal out loud. Elaine's lips compressed into a thin, judgmental line. Marcus leaned forward across the table, his posture demanding obedience. "Skylar," he articulated slowly, enunciating every syllable, "don't be difficult. This is for the benefit of the family." I repeated the refusal just as firmly. No. It was the first time in 24 years I had ever told them no without immediately offering an explanation or an apology. Marcus's face cycled rapidly through confusion, then acute irritation, and finally, something darker and possessive. "You don't understand what is truly at stake here," he threatened. But I did. For the very first time, I understood everything perfectly. When Vanessa let out a small, contemptuous scoff, the last fragile thread of my tolerance snapped. She leaned slightly toward me and whispered, dripping with entitlement, "Come on, Skylar. You weren't even close to Grandpa. Why would he leave you anything real?" My throat tightened, not with the burn of impending tears, but with ferocious clarity. They had never seen me as anything more than a placeholder, a useful pawn to be mined for emotional labor, for quiet compliance, for whatever suited their needs. I leaned back, breathing evenly and deeply. "I'm not signing," I reiterated. That was the precise moment Marcus stood up, grabbed the scroll-like tube containing my diploma from his bag, and flicked open the lighter. His eyes met mine, challenging, openly cruel, entirely certain that this public spectacle would shatter my resolve and force me to bend. "You don't deserve Grandpa's money," he repeated, his voice low but carrying. The small, blue flame touched the corner of the heavy paper, and the entire restaurant seemed to gasp as the document curled instantly into black, smoking ash. But inside me, something shifted, quiet, steady, and irreversible. I wasn't broken. I was finally profoundly awake. The flame should have terrified me. It should have sent me spiraling, dissolving into the tears and supplication that Marcus fully expected. Instead, as the symbol of my academic achievement disintegrated, the turmoil inside me went absolutely still, like a deep lake after the wind dies. Guests murmured nervously. Silverware clattered. Someone instinctively reached for their phone. Vanessa's arrogant smile finally faltered, confusion flickering in her eyes. Elaine remained utterly still, watching me with cold, expectant focus, waiting for me to collapse so she could label my reaction overreacting. But I didn't collapse. I watched the flakes of black ash drift onto the pristine white tablecloth and felt a terrifying sense of lightness. Years of being ignored, dismissed, managed like an irritating inconvenience. All of that settled into one clear, liberating truth. There was nothing left here worth clinging to. Marcus seemed genuinely disappointed that I wasn't crying. "This is what happens when you forget who supports you," he sneered, gesturing toward the smoldering mess. Funny, I couldn't recall a single instance where they had supported me. I stood up slowly, deliberately smoothing the hem of my dress. "Are you done with your performance?" I asked him, my voice cool and even. He blinked, visibly startled by my calmness. Vanessa reached across the table, as if intending to grab my wrist and physically restrain me. "Skylar, stop being dramatic," she snapped. I took a sharp step back before her fingers could make contact. Her hand froze midair. Elaine finally spoke, her voice low, controlled, and chillingly cold. "If you walk out now, Skylar, you are choosing to permanently divide this family." The monumental irony almost made me laugh out loud. They had divided this family long before I was old enough to properly spell my own name. I picked up my small purse, placed my napkin neatly on the table beside the ashes, and met all three of their eyes one by one. "I'm not the one dividing anything," I stated clearly. "I'm just done pretending this is a family." Gasps rippled across the table, but I wasn't acting for theatrics. I wasn't performing my pain. I was simply done being small. I turned and walked out of the restaurant, my heels clicking softly, decisively, against the tile floor. No one pursued me. They were either too stunned, too proud, or both. Outside, the late-night air wrapped around me. Cool, damp, and wonderfully grounding. The streets smelled faintly of rain and exhaust. Cars rolled by in a steady, reassuring rhythm. For the first time all evening, I felt like I could truly inhale. I ordered a rideshare, slid into the back seat, and stared at my own reflection in the darkened window. My eyes weren't red. My hands weren't shaking. I looked like someone who had finally stopped trying to earn a love that was never going to materialize. Aunt Riley's small apartment in Hillrest was dim and warm when I arrived. She had left the door unlocked, a fresh mug waiting on the counter, with chamomile tea bags nestled beside the humming kettle. No questions, no pity, just protective space. Lying on her comfortable couch that night, I replayed the whole scene, not with rage, but with profound understanding. Their cruelty wasn't a sudden outburst. It was practiced, expected, and necessary for their control. And yet, I hadn't broken. I had smiled. I had walked away. Because deep down, I knew a critical detail they missed. Their performance tonight wasn't the end of the story. It was the final, arrogant mistake that made the truth impossible to ignore. And next week, at the lawyer's office, they would finally understand just how badly they had misjudged the quiet daughter. The morning after the dinner, sunlight filtered through Aunt Riley's lace curtains, soft and warm, completely oblivious to the fact that my entire life had shifted overnight. I had expected to wake up shaky, consumed by fury, or perhaps heartbroken. Instead, I felt an unfamiliar crystalline calm, steady, grounded, and sharp in a way that made everything around me feel brilliantly clearer. My phone vibrated nonstop. Vanessa's texts arrived first, short, smug, and dripping with entitlement. Asterisk, "Thanks for the room, sis. I'm repainting it blush pink. You don't mind, right? It's not like you ever liked that house anyway. And hey, maybe try being supportive for once." I stared at the screen until the words blurred, not from tears, but from the overwhelming shock of her genuine, total delusion. She honestly believed the family house was already her property. Then came Marcus's email, nearly 3 pages long. Buried beneath the torrent of accusations. Asterisk ungrateful, selfish, dramatic asterisk was one unmistakable central demand. Asterisk give up the inheritance. Fix the mess you caused. Be the daughter we want. I closed the email without finishing it. Finally, Elaine called. Not to apologize, not to check if I was safe. She launched straight into damage control strategy, acting as if the entire dinner had just been a negotiation that had gone slightly off script. Your father didn't mean to, Skylar, she said, her voice watery with false distress. You know how stressed he gets. Just sign it. This isn't worth tearing the family apart. But the family was already irrevocably torn. I had simply ceased pretending the cracks were merely decorative lines in the marble. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I didn't bother to remind her they had intentionally burned the greatest physical token of my achievement. I simply hung up, then powered off my phone completely, because there was only one conversation that mattered now. I opened my laptop and composed a single, succinct email to Mr. Dalton, the attorney. Asterisk it's time. He replied within minutes. Asterisk next week, Santa Monica office. They'll all be notified. I set the laptop aside, leaned back into Aunt Riley's couch cushions, and exhaled fully. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just reacting to their moves. I was choosing my own. The week passed in a quiet blur, a strange, profound contrast to the brewing storm beneath the surface. At my job, I submerged myself in code reviews and project planning, finding solace in the part of my life that actually functioned logically. In the evenings, I stayed at Aunt Riley's place, drinking herbal tea, helping her with small household tasks, and watching comforting, predictable old movies. She never pressured me to talk about the incident. She just sat with me, a silent, comforting anchor in a world that had violently tilted on its axis. Your grandfather foresaw this moment, she told me gently one night. He trusted you for a reason, Skylar. I nodded, though the weight of that trust settled heavy and determined on my chest. When the day finally arrived, I drove to Santa Monica early. The sky was cloudless, painfully bright, almost mocking the gravity of the meeting. I parked in front of the sleek law office building, smoothed my blazer, and walked inside. The lobby smelled faintly of polished dark wood and citrus cleaning spray. Mr. Dalton greeted me with a solemn, reassuring nod. They're on their way, he confirmed. Are you ready for this, Skylar? I've been ready for years, I replied. We entered the conference room together. A long, intimidating table, tall windows overlooking the city, leather chairs too stiff to allow for comfort. At the center of the table lay a formidable stack of documents, neatly bound, the sheer weight of an entire legacy sealed within clean white pages. 5 minutes later, the door opened. Marcus walked in first, his jaw tight, his eyes sharp with self-righteous indignation. Elaine followed, her expression pinched as though she were bracing for an inevitable embarrassment. Vanessa strolled in behind them, phone still in hand, designer sunglasses perched casually on her head, as if she were heading into brunch instead of a critical legal proceeding. She froze when she saw me. Seriously? She muttered loudly, giving me a dismissive once-over. You actually think this theater is going to change anything? I didn't respond. They sat across from me, a perfect dividing line, a perfect metaphor for our relationship. Mr. Dalton began without ceremony. As stated in the official last will and testament of Mr. Lawson, he started. The room stilled. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. He read line after line, legal details, dates, signatures, witness statements, and then he arrived at the part they never expected. The full estate, including all properties, investments, and controlling business shares, is to be transferred solely to his granddaughter, Skylar Lawson. Elaine's lips parted, frozen in shock. Vanessa's jaw dropped completely. Marcus lunged forward, slamming his hand on the table. That's impossible, he snapped, his voice dangerously low. He promised me. No, Mr. Dalton interrupted calmly, adjusting his glasses. He did not. Vanessa slammed her hand onto the table, echoing her father's rage. I already put a deposit on a studio space. You can't just... I looked at her, steady and unblinking. It's not yours to spend. She shook her head, confusion melting into a renewed entitlement. But you don't even like the house. You don't even care about Grandpa's company. She had no concept of how profoundly I cared. She didn't know about the many summers I'd spent interning quietly, watching the company slide slowly under my father's poor, self-serving leadership. She didn't know about the countless nights Grandpa and I had spent reviewing blueprints and discussing innovative ideas he never got the chance to implement. Marcus tried again, leaning into the bullying force he had wielded my entire life. You are far too young and inexperienced to handle any of this. You will ruin everything. Vanessa is the one who is. Vanessa is entitled. I cut him off, my voice quiet, but sharper and more devastating than any shout. And you both taught her to be. The silence that followed was thick, uneasy, and painfully revealing. Then Mr. Dalton clicked a remote control. I have one final item to show you. A video appeared on the screen mounted on the wall. Grandpa Lawson sat in his study, frail but with his eyes still impossibly sharp. If you are watching this, he began, his voice raspy but clear. It means Skylar kept her promise to stay silent and wait until the truth could finally speak for itself. Elaine covered her mouth, a small, choked sound escaping. Marcus stared at the screen, momentarily frozen. Vanessa whispered, "No." Grandpa continued, his gaze unwavering, directed straight at the camera. I watched you casually dismiss her accomplishments. I watched you incessantly celebrate one child while continually ignoring the other. I watched Skylar grow strong in ways you never bothered or dared to see. The conference room pulsed with tension. No one seemed to dare breathe. And I am leaving her everything, he finished, his voice final. Because strength should be trusted, not exploited. The video ended. Silence swelled like a deafening tide. I stood up slowly, placing my hands lightly on the edge of the table. This was never about revenge, I said, addressing all three of them. This was justice. And this, I gestured toward the bound contracts, is me finally choosing myself. Marcus's face crumpled, not with remorse, but with the stark, devastating realization that his control had irreversibly slipped through his fingers. Elaine looked down, tears finally brimming, weeping for her lost status. Vanessa covered her face, shaking her head as her anticipated future was rewritten in real time. I gathered the documents Mr. Dalton handed me, slid them into my folder, and stepped back from the table. You burned my diploma? I told Marcus, my gaze locked on his defeated face. But you didn't burn my future. No one spoke. No one dared. I walked out of the office into the blinding, bright California sun. For the first time in my life, the light didn't feel oppressive. It felt warm and welcoming, like a spotlight on a stage I had finally claimed. 3 months passed, and the world felt different. Quieter, lighter, wholly mine. I moved into a small, functional apartment on the southern edge of San Jose, close enough to walk or bike to the tech district each morning. The place wasn't large, but it felt deeply safe in a way nothing from my childhood home ever had. A single framed photograph sat on my desk. Grandpa and me in the backyard, both of us laughing at some shared private joke. Work shifted dramatically, too. I had stepped into a decisive leadership role at the company, actively rebuilding the structure from the inside out. There was no room for politics or nepotism, only for competence and integrity. People seemed to breathe easier under the new management. Employees who had once looked defeated and anxious now met me with steady, hopeful eyes. I never heard from my family again. Not a call, not an email, not even a petulant message from Vanessa, who had once been constitutionally unable to remain silent for more than an hour. And strangely, wonderfully, I didn't miss the chaos. What remained was a profound, unshakable peace. Steady, honest, and entirely earned. At night, I stand on my small balcony and watch the city lights flicker like distant, attainable stars. For once, My mind isn't racing with anxieties. I don't wonder what I did wrong or what I need to fix about myself. I wasn't shrinking to fit someone else's narrow comfort zone. I had finally stepped into a life where I didn't have to seek permission simply to exist. Sometimes I reflect on that night. The flames, the sudden silence, the calculated way I walked out without a backward glance. But now, standing here with the cool San Jose breeze brushing past me, I finally understand the lesson Grandpa tried to teach me all along. True strength isn't loud. It is the unshakable certainty of choosing yourself, even when no one else is clapping. My family lost control the exact moment I stopped needing their approval to validate my worth. If this story resonates with you, share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more true family dramas. You are never alone in this fight.